I'm sure there's a lot of questions you guys probably have right now that you're burning to ask. Okay, so we'll start. We'll talk about the organization. We'll talk about a little bit of how we deploy, how we train, how we do things. Then I'll pass the microphone over to First Sergeant. He'll go a little bit more in depth on what your Ranger just went through for the last 8 weeks or so in terms of the program of instruction that they went through in terms of their assessment and their selection. And then obviously we'll get into the Q&A. Okay? So with that, first slide. So where we are, the 75th Ranger Regiment, on or about, is about 3,500 Rangers strong across all military occupational specialties, or what we call MOSs, okay? We're currently rated, obviously we're here at Fort Benning, Georgia. The 75th Ranger Regimental Headquarters is here at Fort Benning. The Regimental Special Troops Battalion, which our company falls under, is here at Fort Benning, as well as 3rd Ranger Battalion is at Fort Benning. 1st Ranger Battalion is on the other side of the state, about 260 miles from here, at Hunter Army Airfield, Georgia, which is smack dab in the middle of Savannah, Georgia. And then 2nd Ranger Battalion is up in the Pacific Northwest at Joint Base Lewis McChord, up in the Seattle-Tacoma area. So that's kind of where we're raised. So based off where your Ranger, hopefully he's articulated to you where he's going, which battalion he's going to join. That's where he'll be living for at least the next 3 years or so. Okay? Obviously you can see the structures in terms of 3,500 strong for the regiment as a whole, and then what comprises about 140 per Ranger Rifle Company, and then about 900 Rangers total per battalion. Okay? Next slide. Okay, so what you can see in terms of our mission and what we bring to the table, what this nation asks us to do on a daily basis, and what's allowed us to stay deployed consistently for the last, I'd say, almost coming up on 14 years. We are in a constant cycle of train, deploy, and prepare to deploy. Okay, and that's what you can kind of see by that alert, combat, and training cycle that's right there. So right now, 3rd Ranger Battalion is currently forward deployed. 2nd Ranger Battalion, which came back in the middle of the summer, they're kind of on their preparatory period and they're training to get ready to assume what 1st Battalion is currently doing, which is the op alert cycle. So when we're not deployed, when we're not kind of coming back into a reset period, we're in a constant state of ready and alert, which allows us to rapidly deploy at a moment's notice, phone call in the middle of the night, pack up our bags, get on an aircraft and fly anywhere in the world. And currently, what we advertise is less than 18 hours or less. And then within 24 hours, the remainder of the battalion is going to go. Okay, and that's something for everyone in this room to kind of understand. For your Ranger, that is something they're going to step into, that they're going to be on call for when their battalion, when their unit specifically is on that cycle. Okay, because obviously we know we're forward deployed in support of, when we were fighting in Iraq, and certainly obviously that's gone away, but now we're in Afghanistan full time, and we're currently deploying in support of that active armed conflict. But outside of that, with everything else going on in the world today, there's always the potential that we're going to get that phone call in the middle of the night and get deployed to support our nation's policies and objectives at a moment's notice. And that cycle that is depicted in front of you, that's what allows us to stay consistently engaged and deployed since October of 2001, when we first went in after the atrocities on September 11th of 2001. Okay? So as you can see, it's a 9-month period. You can, kind of, I don't want to read everything to you, as you can see it behind me, but I just wanted to explain that to you so you understand. And currently, 1st Ranger Battalion is getting ready to go on their 16th deployment, and 3rd Battalion is finishing up, I believe, their 17th deployment. So it kind of puts into perspective the magnitude of how difficult it is to consistently deploy for that amount of time under such a high operational tempo. However, due to the proficiency level of this organization, proficiency and standards that your new Rangers are going to bring to this organization is what's going to allow us to continue that type of tempo for such a consistent amount of time. Okay? And at the end of the day, we are supposed to be, and certainly, or not supposed to be, but what we train to be, and what Sergeant Major Pulley alluded to in his speech, is that we are to, wherever it goes, we are the best. We certainly hang our hat on that, and we do everything every day to ensure that we fulfill that for the nation. I'll now turn it over to First Sergeant. First Sergeant.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is First Sergeant Mike Ironman. I am, as Captain Bucci stated, the First Sergeant of the Regimental Selection and Training Company. In front of you is a rough 8-week schedule of what your loved one just went through. To this point in their lives, they have never been physically, mentally, or emotionally challenged as much as they have been over the past 8 weeks. However, it's not over here. As others before me have alluded to, it is simply the first gate. They are going to be expected to perform at the same level that they performed through the previous 8 weeks for the remainder of their career. If anything, they're going to have to step up to the challenge. your loved ones can pass the minimum standards required of a Ranger in the 75th Ranger Regiment. If he wants to further progress, if he wants to be a leader in the organization, and if he wants to make it from here, he has the building blocks that are necessary, but he is going to have to progress farther. During the last 8 weeks, they've done a lot of PT, a lot of physical training. Every single one of them can score 80% in the Army Physical Fitness exam. They can run 5 miles in under 40 minutes. They can pass the RPAT, which is a combat-focused PT event that they do in body armor. And they can force march 12 miles in under 3 hours with roughly a 35-pound rucksack and weapon. They've conducted land navigation training. They've conducted medical training. The 75th Ranger Regiment is the only unit in the United States Army to not suffer a preventable death during the global war on terror. By preventable death, it means from when they received the wound to when they reached the highest level of care. At no time did we have anybody die that did not receive the necessary life-saving care. They've also conducted mobility training. They've gotten hands-on the majority of the vehicles that we have in our fleet. They've also received advanced marksmanship training. Finally, today on the 8th week, they've graduated. Okay, so from here, your Rangers went back and they are at the barracks right now, getting ready to be released on pass. There are maps up here, up front, from how to get from this point to where they're currently located. All of your young Rangers need to be back here by Tuesday morning at 0600. They are being given a brief on what they can and cannot do. Somebody in the audience wants to ask me what that is, but I'm going to tell you they're big boys. They can tell you what they can and can't do. As you can see up there, if your Ranger is from going to 375 RSTB or regimental headquarters, they literally just have to walk across the street within the next week. If your Ranger is going to 175, the great majority of them will be on a charter bus next week on their way to 175. And if they are going to 275, which is located on the West Coast, within the next 2 weeks, the majority of them will be on an airplane heading to 275. The next biggest question, besides what your Rangers can do for this pass, is when are they going to come home on leave? And the honest answer is, the battalion will decide. I cannot promise you when their next leave date is. Their leave periods are decided by the George cycle, which Captain Bucci talked about earlier. Each of the battalions will decide when your son gets there, your son, your husband, what they can do. Deployments. I know there's that little fear in the back of everybody's head. We still have people in Afghanistan. I cannot tell you whether your son will or will not deploy in the near future. Once again, that is decided by the gaining battalion. What company he goes to will decide whether he deploys or not.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you're wondering, this is where your Ranger is at right now. So understand the reason we do this brief right here is because they have to go back to the barracks. They're going to do some out processing. They're going to get changed in civilian clothes. So it allows us this opportunity to obviously give you this brief and do some Q&A. So don't worry. They're not waiting on you right now. There's still probably another 15, maybe 20 minutes that they're still doing some administrative paperwork and getting their equipment and bags together and getting out processed from RASP 1. So I'd say probably the next 10, 15 minutes, I'm sure your phones will start beeping and vibrating in your pockets as they start to let you know, hey, I'm ready. So just want to let you know that they're not waiting on you right now. This is actually some good time, and they're still doing some things they need to do. Okay, so I guess with that, I'll open up to any questions. If you have any, please raise your hand, and obviously first round I'll be able to come to you, field your question, and we'll go from there. So I'll turn it over to you guys at this time. And don't be bashful, don't be shy. One in the back, yes sir.
Yes, sir, yes,
Now
sir.
that they're Rangers, does that mean that they could be deployed at any time? Or if they were to be deployed, I guess another way to ask the question, are they sufficiently trained to be deployed like that? Immediately?
Good question, sir. First one's going to answer for you.
The flat out answer is no. Your son is not fully prepared yet to go into combat operations. That is not to say he is not going to deploy. A lot of that is a very difficult question to answer because it gets into operational security. Your sons are going to receive further training from here, and at a certain point, his first level supervisor will decide, okay, he's ready to go, but not at this point. That's specifically for an infantryman. There are other low density MOSs, intelligence, communications, medics. For example, the medics from here are going to go to the pre-SOCM course, Special Operations Combat Medic course. That course only starts every few weeks. They'll get a few weeks of additional training here at RSTB in order to prepare them for the pre-SOCM course. Some of those other low density MOSs, they'll go right into their new jobs.
To further expound a little bit, sir, because I know you also mentioned at the beginning of your question about deploying at a moment's notice. In terms of the op alert cycle that I've spoken of previously, again, that is something, and certainly kind of First Sergeant alluded to it, once they get to their unit, there is that opportunity, that potential, but again, it's the chain of command. They're not just going to show up and immediately they're gone. Their chain of command, their leaders are going to take accountability and control of them and be able to do an assessment of them and make sure they are ready, have what they need. And certainly if they show up and a week later or getting that rapid recall to deploy or what have you, likely probably won't go with just because they just got there. We're not going to set them up for failure, we'll set them up for success. Hopefully that answers your question, sir.
15 years ago I was on that stage. I disappeared for 3 weeks, about 6 weeks later. And when I got back, I had about 6 million messages from my mom yelling at me. She was very upset that I hadn't called home. So.
Yes, ma'am.
The average wait time right now, ma'am, is 6 months to a year. That all depends on what MOS your loved one is. That's for an 11 Bravo, which about half the class are. For the low density MOSs, everybody other than 11 Bravo, 13 Fox, or 68 Whiskey. And in layman's terms, an infantryman, a forward observer, or a medic. That length will be much longer because that is not learning those small unit tactics is not necessarily seen as something they need to do right away. They need to become a better intel operator. They need to become a better communicator. So it is important for their development, but they don't need to receive it as early in their development. Does that answer the question, ma'am?
No,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you have Rangers that are 96 B-20s, intelligence analysts?
We do, sir. We do. And within the Regimental Special Troops Battalion, we have an RMIC, or a Regimental Military Intelligence Company, which specializes in the military intelligence field as well as at the battalion levels. We have obviously our battalion S2 section, which specializes in intelligence there as well. Yes, miss.
Yes, ma'am.
Said that's 6 months to a year of CERT training.
6 months to a year.
It's a great question. So the question was for a military or for a Ranger spouse living in Kentucky and going up to JBLM or up to the Pacific Northwest. The military will take care of all of that. Being married makes you then a dependent of the Ranger as well as your children as well. And then through their PCS or permanent change of station process, all that paperwork, all of that will be set up. They'll come to your house, they'll move everything. Literally, you just tell them which box it'll be all taken care of, and then they'll move you onto your follow-on post. That's also another process that we have here internally within our battalion. Once we identify those individuals going to each battalion that are married and have dependents, we forward that information to the gaining unit. So you should expect a phone call within the next, I'd say, 2 weeks from that gaining battalion to welcome you in, to make sure you have what you need, make sure you're taken care of, and certainly knowing that you're going to make that long distance journey from the Midwest all the way up to the Pacific Northwest. So everything will be taken care of. So hopefully that answers your question.
Where's your spouse from? What battalion is he going to? He's going to go to second first. He's going to learn where you guys should live, and then he'll be put on permissive TY for 10 days to actually conduct physical movements. We don't want people going blind into their duty for duty posts, especially since the majority of the guys up here are private. They're going to be integrated into the battalion. It's going to take a short period of time. You'll then be put on permissive TY and conduct the activity.
Yes, ma'am. Is housing furnished? No, ma'am. There are lending closets though, ma'am, that there are places on post that they're able to get furniture and different things to furnish their homes while they look to accumulate things of their own as well to help them. Absolutely, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
It's from where they enlisted from. So, say, you know, you have moved your stuff because the spouse is staying with her mom in Nebraska, but you're going to 275, and for some reason, that individual ranger enlisted in California. They pay for the move from California. That's the max they're willing to pay. So say you're going to 175, and your stuff is farther west than where you actually enlisted from, the Army is not going to pay for that move from where you enlisted from to wherever you are now. The only payment is where you enlisted from to the game unit.
Yes, sir.
The Rangers are.
Yes, sir.
There's a max weight allowed for.
So based off your ranger's rank, that's what determines how much weight he is allowed to move as an individual or as a soldier within the Army. So that's what will determine that. And then when he goes, so here at his post here at Fort Benning, he'll go to the movement office, and that's all they specialize in. And he'll give them all his paperwork, his orders that'll tell where he came from, where he's going to, and then they have all the regulations that determine what he's, not necessarily what he's allowed to move, but how much weight he's authorized for a moving company to then come to his home or wherever his stuff is, pack it all up into boxes, and then transport it to his follow-on duty station.
This is only for married folks. If your ranger is single, he does not get permissive TDY to move. He can file for money when he goes home on leave to move the stuff, but he's not going to get the time off. For permissive TDY, and that time off is only for married people. They'll still move his stuff. He'll get the money to physically do it himself. And it's not a lot for him. It's not a lot because you should leave it at that. Trust me, no, not for the vehicle. They'll get some gas money for the ride, but they're not going to get anything else.
The Army refers to it as a ditty or do-it-yourself move, so it won't be where movers come and pack everything. It'll pretty much be a lot of money to move himself, and if he has a vehicle, then drive his stuff to wherever his following is going to be. You're welcome. Question over here, sir? Yes, sir. They will. As of right now, we have your ranger will have that address for here while they're at pre-RASP, or while they're still within our control. The responsibility until we officially ship them out. Then once they move to their gaining battalion, once they arrive, then obviously, certainly if they're single, they'll move into the barracks, they'll have their mailing address for that unit, or if they're married, then they'll obviously have whatever, whether it's a house on post, or if they decide to live in the local community outside the post. Your ranger will have that with wherever they go to, sir. Yes, sir. That's certainly, yeah, it'd be certainly opinion-based, sir, but I leave that up to you to decide what's going to be in the best interest of your ranger in terms of what they'd like to do with that, sir, quite honestly. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So if they are deciding to, once they get their orders and they decide to drive, if they have a POV, It's certainly a lot quicker if they're going to fly, typically 1 day of travel time, but if not, they're going to drive, then don't quote me, I think they get at least 3 days or 3 to 5 days to depart here and to get up there if they're going to drive their POV or privately owned vehicle. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
He follows the rules.
Yeah.
Don't do any of that.
Yeah, Forrest was just telling me, like, I don't think, we might not be going until November.
Maybe.
Yeah, he was saying that he thought that they might have to stay here and post that until like the first week in November. But he said next week.
End of the week.
Yeah.
Every time you put it on social media, you're putting his order. It's not even going to talk about the agreement. You post the wrong thing on social media. As much as they've been through, about 20% of this class will further be accredited in the next 6 months. As much as these guys have been through, about 20% of this class will be accredited in the next 6 months to a year. We talk about accepting the beret and understanding it's a
Check him out
lifestyle,
in Italian.
and that we now have further expectations for them to meet these same standards for the rest of their life. About 20% of this class will not fully accept that.
50%.
Don't think they're done. Don't think there's nowhere else to go professionally. They won't understand that if they don't grow as an individual and as a ranger, that they'll fall to the wayside and will no longer meet the standard. About 20% of this class historically does not understand that. Will be released to the standards from the regiment after their arrival. Everybody wants to blame the regiment and how hard it is on the individual. But they all ended knowing what our expectations are.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, ma'am. I guess like I said, everyone hear what first sergeant said? Anyone not hearing? Just make sure, so there's no confusion out there. Okay, great. Anyone else?
All right, end on that note. Your sons have done a tremendous job thus far. And those who accept this as a lifestyle it will be very fulfilling. I've done it for 15 years. I was in the 1st Ranger Battalion for 15 years, and I recently moved here to Fort Benning, Georgia 4 months ago. I've made that choice. No one forced me to do it. They are a cog in the machine. What I mean by that is they are an organization by which selfless service is recognized. If they can give up themselves, if they can fully understand that this is a lifestyle, not just a job, and that if other people's lives are relying on their actions, they fully accept that, they will be successful.
The hardest part now, ladies and gentlemen, is for them to continually meet the standards that we ask of them. What they did in the last 8 weeks is to show that they can meet the minimum standard that we require them, 80% or better in pretty much every event that we, or the questions that we ask of them. Okay, so from this point forward, now that they're part of the organization, the very difficult piece is still being able to meet or exceed that standard that we ask of them on a daily basis, and that's what First Sergeant was alluding to, about how 20% of the guys are on the stage, and I know it's a difficult statistic to understand or to want to realize, but 20% will not be able to meet or exceed that standard that we continually ask of them. They were able to do it for 8 weeks, but it's another thing to do it for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And that's all we're alluding to. And really to bring it all together is what I talked to before, what Sergeant Major Pulley I talked to, and really what the Ames Charter is about, is that's what allows us to go and remain the best at what we do wherever that we go. Because the folks, the Rangers that make our ranks are that good. And they're able to meet and exceed the standards better than anyone else and do it consistently because they internalize what it means to be a Ranger. Okay, any other questions, ladies? Yes, sir.
No question. I just want to thank you, the rest of the people here.
Thank you, sir. at this time, ladies and gentlemen, we have flyers down front. I'm going to hand the microphone off to Sergeant First Class Jacobs, so I'll give you a quick directions on how to get from where you're currently at over to where your Rangers are. Thanks so much for attending. If there's any other questions, feel free to get us down in front. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Rangers lead the way.
What? So do we just go where they are?
Yeah.
Rangers lead the way. See you later.
See you later.
Or
Good seeing.
each other just like
Yeah.
Well.
I'm just about done, guys. Here, cut that off for me. Just hit the button right there.